Welcome to Messy Marriages, sharing stories of messy moments in marriages and how we make the most of our mistakes. We will undress the truth about sex, intimacy, and lifelong love. What are the concerns and questions most couples have in marriage and often go unspoken until now? Host Mark Lucas brings wisdom, authenticity, and practical advice to even the toughest marriage topics.
Welcome to Messy Marriages. What a joy it is week in and week out to have these conversations with you. My heart and my desire is that no matter where you are right now in your walk of life of marriage, is that God would use this moment in this time to be able to encourage you. I'm the first one to tell you each and every show, my marriage is messy. It's far from perfect. It's obviously under construction. That's why I get to host a show called Messy Marriages. But in this show, my desire, my heart is that if your marriage is amazing right now, that's awesome. Or if right now you're struggling and you've got to figure out how you can fight for your marriage, wherever you might be right now, this show is designed. Our desire is that God would use the show to help you in a beautiful way fight for your marriage. Today, we get to navigate marriage through a newfound friend of mine, Curtis Bay. And we just really get to talk about his marriage to his beloved bride, Tammy, and to really navigate. There's these three things that really he has come to a beautiful conclusion that possibly these three things really were the fabric that held their beautiful marriage together. So today, those three things, I'm going to share them now, and then we're going to dive into all three. Forgiveness is one of those. Expectations and grace. Curtis, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you share with the listeners just a little bit of a flyover, your marriage and your beautiful relationship with Tammy?
Yeah, we met, Tammy and I met in 1982 in Vancouver, Washington. I was actually driving my hot rod muscle car down this strip, we used to call it. They called it the Loop or something like that. And she was coming out of a restaurant with her parents. Her friend whistled. She didn't have the courage to whistle back. She wasn't that girl. But I saw her out of the corner of my eye, and I told my buddy, hey, I'm coming back. If she's still here, I'm going to talk to that girl. That was 1982, July 20th, 1982. We were married May 25th, 1985. So actually this month we would be celebrating 38 years together. So we raised two beautiful boys. I had started a small business in Washington State, expanded to Oregon, and then got an opportunity to expand to California. About a year after that, came to Phoenix. So in 92, we relocated here, brought our family here, raised two boys, went to the local high schools, Marcos de Niza and Corona. They went on to college, Colorado. My oldest boy went and played basketball there as a Buffalo, and my youngest boy ended up at ASU. And then Tammy and I, when we were empty nesters, looked at each other and thought, man, what are we going to do now? We'd almost forgotten each other's name to some degree. That comes with the territory, right? I mean, we'd be celebrating 38 years. So there was a lot that you cover with boys traveling, all that. She loved being a boy's mom. Boy, we can talk about that too. But yeah, great, just an unbelievable experience. Love her. I miss her. As you know, that I lost her in January 2022. So my life looks a little bit different. And one of the reasons why I'm here, in fact, I think she would be saying, exactly, let God lead. And I'm glad you're with Mark today. So I think we're destined to be together and help share some of this stuff.
Thank you for just your vulnerability and your courage to be here today. And we both married Tammy's, and Tammy is home with the Lord now. And yet in this moment, I think for all of us, when we have these moments where we realize our life, the legacy, what we are called to do, that there is a deepened clarity, a deepened sense of urgency to be able to say, I want to go and live every day moving forward, to be able to honor Tammy, to be able to honor the Lord, to be able to help others. And I think for you, brother, in the short time that I've gotten to know you, I'm encouraged that you get to be able to really kind of lean into the listeners right now and say, you have learned some beautiful lessons that Tammy has taught you through her legacy, through her life, and you want to honor her each and every day and be able to really celebrate now with the listeners the beautiful things that she taught you, the beautiful things that she modeled for you, the beautiful things that she showed you through these beautiful years of marriage that you had together. And obviously, you miss her every day more than I could ever describe with words. It's hard to even say that out loud because it's just falls short in how much you miss her. But I really want to walk through these 3 words because I think at the end of our life, we want to leave a legacy. And in a lot of ways, these 3 words are part of that beautiful legacy, the legacy of your marriage that you're now able to share with our beautiful listening audience. So let's start with the first word, forgiveness. And maybe if you can just unpack that, because obviously forgiveness, we know what it means, but there's so many layers to it. There's so much depth to it. So maybe if you can just kind of walk the listeners through, why is forgiveness one of those key ingredients to really have this amazing, thriving marriage?
Yeah, that is super important. In fact, Tammy was the face of God on the earth to me. I didn't have a good relationship with Christ for a long time during our relationship. I measured everything by what sort of man, material, checked all the boxes, raised a good family, built good business, made money, bought homes, traveled, did everything that I was supposed to do. And all along that way, over nearly 40 years, I failed a lot. And she had this unyielding desire to always find the good in whatever we were doing or whatever I was pursuing. And in that, she was able to forgive me for mistakes. Sometimes they were just simple mistakes, maybe a budget mistake, or I spent money where I shouldn't spend it, or I invested in a business I shouldn't invest in. But other times they were significant mistakes, adultery, addictions, things that I'm not proud of at all. But that forgiveness allowed me a space and allowed us a space to be able to navigate life in a different way, in a deeper way. And her relationship with God allowed me to be able to fail like this and come back 100%, 180 degrees and face it and be able to move on with the admiration of her, with the grace from her, and the ability to recognize my failure and then move on. But without that forgiveness, I don't know that I could have ever been who we were as a married couple, and certainly not me as a father or a husband. It was because of her love for Christ and her own understanding of forgiveness from him that she was able to communicate that with me. And it was something that I'm still learning how to do. I came up hard, so I don't trust a lot of people, but she, in displaying that to me as a human, as my wife, as my best friend, my lover, my partner, and as God's representative to me, I think personally, it's helped me navigate through some relationships, tough business decisions, and things like that. But forgiveness was more than just saying I'm sorry. In fact, I'll just share with you a moment where we had a year ago, before all this tragedy occurred in our lives, and I said to her at one point, it was around her birthday, and I said, I know I've said I'm sorry many times in our life for many things, and we've faced all these things, and we've moved on, and we're better people because of it. But I don't know if I've ever asked you for forgiveness. And in that moment, she said to me with a twinkle in her eye and a smile like she always had, she just said, I forgave you a long time ago, Curtis, and so did God. That was a moment in our life where things changed for us too. We were mature in our love, mature in our relationships, and mature in our faith. But for me, it was just another opportunity to witness God in her, and then what that could look like for me. And at the time, I didn't realize how much of an impact that was going to have. But yes, forgiveness is critical to us, and it's not just saying you're sorry.
Thank you again for sharing what you just shared with the audience and with myself. I think so many things you just shared really resonate so true in my heart as well. And I think at the end of the day, when you said that forgiveness is more than just saying I'm sorry, it's a real understanding that God gives us, and I think really only God can give us the strength to really be able to lean on Him and say, I don't want to hold on to this. I don't want to harbor this. I don't want this to be inside of me in the way that produces bitterness or causes a drift between me and my spouse. So to really, I always think of forgiveness as like canceling the debt. Whatever it is we feel like we're holding on to, giving it and surrendering it, saying, God, I give this to you. I don't want to keep score of things my spouse has done because I know that that just causes us to be divided and separated. And marriage is this beautiful oneness of a partnership. So I love what you just shared. And I think so many of us can take it to heart and really say, Lord, am I doing things in my marriage where I am scorekeeping or I'm tallying up what he has done or she has done? And there's kind of this list that I have in my head, and I need to just tear it up, that tally sheet, and say, God, it is yours. Help me do this. Help me forgive her. Help me say that I want to remember it no more and just give it to you, God. And I love that. The expectations, the second real key ingredient in your beautiful marriage to Tammy, what does that mean, expectations? Because I know that sounds a little bit goofy, is even what you said in your vernacular. What does that mean, Curtis, expectations?
Yeah, that's an interesting piece too. And I've had this conversation with my own kids and their spouses too. If I could just to wrap what you said about forgiveness, it wasn't just about saying I'm sorry as much as it was about me being able to realize I had so much guilt about what I had done. Her saying that she forgave me took all that away from me, and that's what Christ does. I didn't recognize that as a human. I always felt and carried the guilt. So that was extra baggage that always would get in the middle of personal relationships and business relationships for me. But she displayed that to me and was able to communicate it in a way that once I figured out just that, how deep that relationship was and what that meant, to your point, it canceled the debt. It changed everything for me and Tammy and along. And I think it probably happened throughout our marriage. I just didn't realize it because she was so good at it. But on the expectation front, oftentimes, if you talk to folks about some of the struggles they're having, they'll say, well, he doesn't hear me, or she doesn't hear me, or they're not listening, or I said this, or I wanted that, and he's not executing, and all that sort of stuff. I would use the analogy that in business, you've got a team of people that are all working for the same common goal, and everyone has the same desire. Everybody wants the same outcome. And you'll send out an email, and in today's society, we all have sort of this instant response mechanism where we think that, I know you got the email, I know you got the text, right. How come you didn't respond? And yet the rest of your team is sitting back there saying, I'll get to you as soon as I get to you, or I know the agenda, we're on the same team. And you come to a meeting and all of a sudden you're asking questions about, how come I didn't get this response back? But everyone else is thinking you're all still on the same page. Oftentimes that expectation is, you had an expectation you would get a response immediately. They had an expectation that they had performed and would, get you the info later. The expectation of the communication is what I think is oftentimes missed. If you lay out what your expectation is in terms of what that communication is supposed to look like, it's easier to talk about how the communication gaps occur.
Yeah. And I think that's so beautiful in the way you just brought together the expectation of the communication. I think when I think about marriage, at least in my marriage, one of the real kind of barometers for me to know if things are off is looking at 3 pillars: communication, trust, and respect. And they're all really connected. And I think that communication and the expectations that we have around the communication is so vitally important in our marriage. How did you walk that out practically? How did you continually work on the expectations and the communication in your marriage to Tammy?
Yeah, so we would actually talk, as we matured, we would actually talk about these things, because in our early parts of our marriage, it was just, hey, we said we were going to buy a car, and you didn't tell me I needed to worry about a budget. You didn't tell me about a payment. You didn't tell me about any of that. So we just said we were going to buy a car, and I went out and found a car, and now you're mad because I spent $700 a month on this Acura brand new car. What's the problem? Where if we had talked about and been more clear about what our expectations were in buying a car back then in our youth, it would have been easier. As we matured, it became there was a lot more clarity around those conversations. So whether it was vacations, travel, feelings, commitments, work-related, business, money, whatever it might be, we talked through those things and what we both had in terms of expectation. And then when we had communications or there were challenges in it, it was easy to go back to, this is where we were when we started and what we agreed to. And we didn't have conflict then about the communication. We just might have a challenge about where we were in the process, maybe. And then we could even talk about that again and navigate through what that looked like. But laying out the expectation for each party made a lot more sense to us as we matured in our relationship in a way that we could act on it rather than be challenged or feel like someone had failed us or that you weren't listening to me. I hear that so often from folks. You just not listening to me, or he doesn't hear me, or those sorts of things. And this, by having a conversation around what you expect from me in that communication, I can probably perform a little bit better. We're men. That's what we want to do. We do want to do, good things. We want to hoe, the row. We want to watch. We want to plant the seed. We want to do all of those things. So I want to make you happy. And if I know better how to do that or what your expectation is, I can fulfill it.
That's so well said. I wanted to ask you, was there kind of a set rhythm of your week where you guys would really kind of huddle up and have a conversation about the upcoming week and say, okay, here's some expectations that I have this week. Here's what's on my plate. Here's what's going on at work. Here's what's going on in the home. Here's what's going on in our calendars, but really a time to be able to connect. I know for my wife and I, some of the best times we have to really communicate the expectations for the week is to do that in our walks. And we've got 2 dogs, but to be able to be outside, my one dog, Rusty, love him, my Chow, he pees on everything. And then my one dog, Toby, we would just get out. We live on a golf course and just get out in the beautiful creation of where we live and just say, you know what? We're just going to not bring our phones and we're just really going to kind of unpack where we're headed and where we're going this week. And for us, that's been a kind of a really good best practice.
Yes. We didn't walk that much. Tammy was way more athletic and active than I was. I was way more focused on trying to build companies and build relationships. And so I would sit in front of and do work I would wash the car or something, something like that, where she would take off for a hike. But one of the things that was consistent with us as we matured was we found this time, we loved the happy hour period in our community. So in Old Town Scottsdale or Chandler, Gilbert, wherever it was, we loved to people watch. We didn't drink or do anything like that, but we loved the open feeling of being together and just, we found God everywhere. So it was an opportunity for us to just sit down and share our experiences for the day, talk about what's upcoming for the next day. But we chased each other that way. We would send texts during the day joking about where we were going to meet, how we were going to hook up, what we were going to be wearing, what food we were going to order. And it freed that whole experience of communicating like that gave us an opportunity when we arrived at the destination. We were excited to see each other, which is rare in a 40-year marriage or relationship. But once we got there, we were excited to share. I know in my earlier years, I think there was a study once done, you might know more about it, Mark, than me, but women speak 80,000 words in a day or something, and men 300. I don't know if that's
a few more than 300, but I don't know, not much more.
So I would often push back, like, okay, I got enough. But
are you almost through the 80,000?
Yes, I'm counting, by the way.
I hit my 300 at breakfast.
Yes.
So.
But we chased each other in a way that once we got there, we were super excited to see each other. Couldn't wait to hear what each had shared that day and our experiences, and then what the next day might hold or the week. And then the weird thing was, while we weren't attending any particular building for church, we, on our Sundays, we would always catch up with each other and plan our upcoming weeks and recommit to each other and our soul about what we were going to do and how we were going to live. So it was the happy hour thing for us was a lot of fun. We just enjoyed going to different areas around Phoenix and seeing people and communities and things, and then sharing our experiences for the day.
I love people watching. I'd be remiss not to get to the third beautiful one that you had written down, and that's grace. So obviously grace, we could probably spend 24 hours having conversations about both of our Tammys and the way they showed us grace. But what did grace mean to you, brother, and why is it so important in marriage?
So I think I didn't realize the impact grace actually had. And in fact, for a long time, the word was sort of just part of the vocabulary that everybody uses all the time. I never really put it into practice for me. I didn't understand what impact it had on our life. Forgiveness was what I had triggered grace to mean, right? Was that I was just being forgiven and I could move on and she was going to accept me and she wasn't going to be mad for the 30th time. But the grace, I think when I really started to figure out what that looked like was as our relationship matured and Tammy's commitment to both Christ and our family never wavered as a result of outside distractions. So no matter how I failed or how improper I might have been or how, I made a bad decision, anything like that, that may have normally hurt her, and maybe it did at the time and she dealt with it, but the fact that every single time we were faced with these types of challenges, no matter what it was, she always had the purest spirit and ultimate joy and hope that whatever we were doing was in God's will and it was the right way to act. And that spirit of, it was love is what it was. But in that, I recognized that was, for me, that was truly grace. That space to be able to fail quickly, fail often, but never be judged was the grace. She never judged me at all. Everything was always what she believed was the right thing for us to be doing. And I might not go about it the right way, but she always believed that our purpose was pure and that what we were doing made sense. And that was the grace, that she never, ever judged me. That was the difference. Forgiveness, I had been trapped in thinking that meant grace for a long time in my life. And after having reflected on this experience and losing her, I realized that was that she never judged me, and that was the ultimate grace.
As I hear those words from really the bottom of your soul, and I spend a little bit of time even just right now letting those words sink in, I think as I had a chance to write down some words that really jumped out that you just shared, this unwavering spirit, this joy, this purity of her heart, and that all of that really was rooted in never judging you. And I think to myself, and I think to our listeners right now, what would it look like in your marriage? What would it look like in my marriage right now to say, God, will you help me more and more every day to not judge my spouse ever? I just want to continually show my spouse this unconditional love that, God, you show me, this unconditional grace that you show me, a joy that truly does come from God. And yet that would transform and change all of our marriages, because each and every day the reality is there's kind of a natural drift in this world. And that drift is really, in a lot of ways, there's things in the busyness of life and in the world that are pulling us apart a little bit in marriage. And yet when we make and have a paradigm shift and make a conscious effort to say, Lord, I don't ever want to judge. I want to love my spouse unconditionally. And for you to really do a deep dive into your heart and your soul and think about your beautiful wife that went home to be with the Lord, Tammy, and think the example that she set for you, which really is walking out God in so many beautiful ways and the characteristics of God. We have an opportunity as well to do that here in this time that we get and in this time that we're gathered right now listening to this conversation with you, Curtis. So, Curtis, thank you for being my guest today. Thank you for your vulnerability, your courage, your openness, and your honesty to be able to help the listening audience and encourage them and walk with them in their marriage. Thank you again, brother, for being here. It's a joy to have these conversations with you. Thank you so much for tuning in to Messy Marriages. We will talk to you real soon. Take care.